Thank you all for tuning in to our second installment of the Reading the Tea Leaf series, which focuses on the critical and programmatic issues that the ACLU of Alabama is championing, is being a champion of, excuse me for that. But I'm very, very excited about today's installment. We are focusing April on Second Chance Month. And what this is particularly focusing on as it relates to what the work of the ACLU does is our criminal legal reform work. And that is really steeped in our Smart Justice Program initiative, which focuses on decarceration. Knowing the prison crisis in Alabama, the nationwide Smart Justice Initiative really focuses on decarcerating by 50% by 2025. And we understand that the mass incarceration crisis disproportionately affects Black communities. And the focus on reform is in pretrial, parole, and sentencing guidelines. And that is the work that the ACLU particularly does as we are educating folks on criminal legal reform work, advocacy through litigation, and primarily through the efforts that we focus on in our state legislature, particularly totally repealing the Habitual Felony Offender Act, which is Alabama's three strikes law. But that is not why you all are here today. The importance of April and Second Chance Month is uplifting the voices of advocates and those who have been formerly incarcerated. And this month we have collaborated with the Offender Alumni Association, Deborah Daniels, who is the executive director, as well as those who have been supported by OAA. We also have joining us our investigative reporter, Beth Shelburne, who really focuses much of her work and reporting on criminal legal reform and has been a real advocate in ensuring that the governor's focus on building new prisons has essentially been stalled. And that is really due to her work and reporting and really the grassroots efforts that we see on the ground. So I'd like to start off by introducing you all to Deborah Daniels, who is the executive director of OAA, which began in 2014 as a support group out of Birmingham, Alabama. And after 2 years, they developed a 501c3 supporting those who have been formerly incarcerated and their families. Deborah Daniels is the co-founder of OAA. She has championed many causes in Alabama, as well as actively serving on numerous committees and task forces focused on reducing recidivism of formerly incarcerated folks. Despite having been incarcerated herself, she has evolved as a vocal change agent for empowering formerly incarcerated folks. She firmly believes that the missing component to reforming the criminal legal system is positioning those who've been formerly incarcerated for positive change and empowerment to maintain that change. With our incarceration being the nation's leading crisis, Deborah is equipped to understand what that means and how to make a significant difference. So I'd like to turn it over now to Miss Deborah Daniels.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks to American Civil Liberties Union for allowing us to be a part of this opportunity to share our experience and to make change in our communities and in our society together as partners. So thank you, Jatwan, for that. I appreciate it. And like Jatwan said, I am a former offender. I am what society would call a repeat offender. So I didn't go to prison just one time. I was part of that revolving cycle. I went to prison 3 times, but it was during that 3rd term that I realized I wanted something different in life. And in so realizing that, I started to make changes and started to reach out to people who could help me be successful once I re-entered society. I worked for Prison Fellowship Ministries for 19 years. Prison Fellowship is one of the largest national prison ministries that was started by Chuck Colson, who was former assistant to President Nixon. And Prison Fellowship actually ministered to me and my children during my incarceration. So when I was released in 1997, I started off as a volunteer, just giving back through Prison Fellowship, doing things like stuffing envelopes, licking stamps. At that time, you had to lick stamps. I've been out since 1997 now. And then in 2000, a position became available and I applied for it and was given the opportunity to come on staff as program manager. During my 19 years tenure, I moved from program manager to field director and then to regional director of the Southeast region, covering 7 states. But in 2010, we started a program at Bibb Correctional Facility called Transformational Ministry. And that was where we actually went inside and intentionally and in depth prepared men to come out with the tools that they needed. But what we realized was that something was missing. Even though we worked with them a year or 2 years inside, if we didn't have something for them when they were released, their success rate was tremendously low. And we also realized that there was a missing component. And that missing component was those individuals who had been impacted by incarceration, families who had experienced the hardship of having loved ones incarcerated, coming together to be a support for one another. Because for so long, the guidelines of parole or any kind of supervision, provisions hindered you from actually being able to associate or affiliate with another known offender. But who better to walk with me than those who have actually traveled that journey, who have actually had that lived experience to help another person overcome those challenges and barriers to success. So in coming on board with Prison Fellowship Ministries, I met a former offender named Myrie Talbert Jr. And he said to me, if you want to learn how to stay out of prison, jump in my back pocket. And I thought he was being arrogant. But when I reflected back on his words, I realized there was some truth to that, because he had successfully come out of prison and now was working for one of the largest ministries in America. So if I wanted to learn, why wouldn't I jump in his back pocket and allow him to teach me, to guide, to mentor, and to coach me into becoming that productive member of society with a meaningful life? The Offender Alumni Association mission is to create a network of former offenders, who inspire each other to reduce crime and recidivism and to develop healthy relationships in their families and communities, and provide opportunity for social, economic, and civic empowerment. Because we know that we are stronger together. A couple of our mottos is leaving the past behind, because we're moving to a brighter future. And the other one is modeled after the NAAA concept, one offender helping another offender. We have some key objectives: our peer-to-peer support, because like I said, who better to walk with me than someone who has actually traveled that journey? But we also realize that we need to strengthen our family relationships. And we need to understand that we cause some harm. I remember when I came out of prison this last time, my children were very hesitant because they didn't know what to expect. Because what I had shown them in the past was that I would return to prison. And then about a year later, after volunteering with Prison Fellowship and getting into church and being active in the community, my kids would say, Mom, go ahead. We know you'll be back, you know? So that trust, they were learning to understand that something was different. And that was because the life that I was living at this time was demonstrating that I had changed. But also giving back to my community is also important because I was a part of the decay, the destruction in my community. I'm one of those who sold the drugs. I was one of those who stole. So I needed to go back and make amends. And we do that by going out and doing community care days, whatever it takes, seeing about our elderlies, the sick, cutting their grass, fixing small handy things around the house for them. But also, I also knew we needed to go back into prison because we had left some people behind that we had developed relationships with. Because anytime you sleep, eat, celebrate holidays, cry with one another, there's a relationship that's built. And for so long, we have been hindered from doing that because the guidelines again say you can't go back into prison until you've been out 3 years, or you're no longer on any kind of supervision. But who better to go back in than the person who has just come out to give that light and that hope that there is life after prison. And we want to remove the stigma that is attached to us. Just because we made a mistake does not mean that we are a mistake. We can be contributing members if society would give us an opportunity to do that. So we believe, OAA believes that people can change. We believe in giving back. We believe in making a positive difference. We believe in service. And we also believe that mistakes are a stepping stone to success. So, like Twan said, OAA was birthed in 2014 by a vision between myself and my co-founder, former Chief Justice Drayton Neighbors, out of a desire to add that missing component to reentry, to successful transitioning. Since its inception, OAA has connected to over 2,000 incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, or family members of individuals that have been incarcerated. We've had the opportunity to reach over 75 youth who society has labeled as at risk. But I remember when I was young and I got expelled from school and I was sent for a psychological evaluation. And this is what they told me. They said I was a troubled child from a dysfunctional family, but they never told me what the solution was. So here we are as those individuals in the past, standing in the gap for our youth, standing there with our hands out to say, you have worth and value, and giving them an opportunity to have a life, a path in life that they can achieve. So I want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And I am just so excited about all that is happening here in Alabama as we have mobilized and unified to make a difference.
Deborah, thank you so much for sharing the work of OAA and also your story. I do hope that we will delve into that more, but you illustrated something that is so critical. You talked about being a young person and someone telling you who you were and speaking that to you. And the truth of the matter is that is the critical issue of mass incarceration, is the school to prison pipeline. And what is the work that we are doing, not only as advocates, but ensuring that we are speaking to that issue and not only reducing mass incarceration, but ensuring that we are reducing the factors and the pipelines that lead to it. So I'd like to really get into the second part of this discussion, and that is with Beth Shelburne, who will be in conversation with Mr. McKeithen and Deborah Daniels today. Beth is the ACLU of Alabama's investigative journalist and writer. She has done extensive investigative reporting on Alabama's prison system and was named the 2018-2019 Writing for Justice Fellow with PEN America. Beth earned her master's degree in creative writing at UAB in 2018 and her bachelor's degree in mass communication and journalism from Auburn University. She spent 20 years working in television news and most recently as WBRC in Birmingham. Beth currently serves as an investigative reporter for the Campaign for Smart Justice with the ACLU of Alabama and is an instructor with UAB's Honors College. We are so very fortunate to have Beth with us today, and I will turn it over to you, Beth, to introduce our great panelist.
Thank you so much, Chatan. And Deborah, thank you as well. I love listening to you, Deborah, and it just reminds me of why I support OAA. I'm a board member of OAA and why it's important for people that may not have a direct connection to mass incarceration to support these organizations that are helping people, because all of us are just one bad choice away from being in the system ourselves. So Deborah, thanks for sharing the important work of OAA. So I see Dena has joined us, and I'm so glad to see your smiling face, Dena. And Ron, glad to see you as well. For everybody that is joining us, as Chatan mentioned, I'm an investigative reporter and writer, but I met Ron McKeithen, I think it was back in 2014 when I was on assignment at Donaldson Correctional Facility, doing a story which ended up being a 30-minute documentary about an educational program that UAB does inside the prison. And Ron and I began corresponding, and Ron ended up being the focus of my master's degree thesis. I began a pretty extensive investigation into Alabama's habitual offender law. And Ron has really been a teacher to me, to understand how people end up in the criminal justice system and how people in prison are no different from people that are not in prison, except for circumstances in their life and choices. And all of us have the same things and the same challenges going on. So Ron, thank you for being a great teacher to me. And I know that some people on this Zoom probably don't know your story, but just to give them a little brief version, Ron has been out of prison for just a couple of months after a very long stay. And so Ron, if you could let everybody know what your sentence was, what it was for, and how much time you actually served before you walked out of prison in December 2020.
All right, thank you, Beth. I served 37 years for first-degree robbery. I was sentenced back in '84. And it was a hard 37 years. And as Beth just explained, what she didn't tell you is that she saved my life. If it wasn't for her noticing me and really just, I don't know, bring attention to me and what I've been doing, I would still probably be there. So she's actually the first person that I guess you could say recognized my work, that felt that the more attention should be brought to my case.
Thank you, Ron. And I want to introduce Dena as well. Dena also served time in prison. Dena is with OAA, and she is the person on the ground helping folks like Ron in their reentry back into society. Dena, I know that you've been walking with Ron through this whole amazing and challenging process that he's been going through for the past couple of months. And I want to talk about that. But Dena, you also faced the possibility of never getting out of prison. Tell everyone what your sentence was, how much time you ended up serving, and when and how you were able to be released from prison.
Thanks, Beth, for all of the incredible things you do. I'm like Ron, you are a phenomenal person, and all of you guys, thank you for your audience. I am Dena Dickerson, and I served a total of 10 years on a 114-year sentence for a nonviolent charge starting in 2002. And I had a 30-year setup. I had went up for parole. What that means is that the judge had signed off that it would be at least 30 years before the possibility of considering any relief of my sentence, whether that was probation, parole, or maybe even being reconsidered. However, I went up for parole 5 times, and on the 6th time, I was granted parole. The 5th time, they said I needed to pay the piper a little bit more. That's what the parole board told my family when they said no.
And what year did you get out, Dena?
In 2012.
Okay. Well, Dena has been an amazing advocate for people who are still in the system and who are coming out, like Ron. So Ron, you served 37 years under Alabama's infamous Habitual Felony Offender Act. And part of the reason that I began investigating this law and really became obsessed with learning how many people were sent to prison with what I call death in prison sentences, because life without parole means you are not getting out. You have run out of options. You're not worth redeeming, is the message sent to people. You're one of many people, hundreds of people that ended up in that sentence for things like robbery, burglary, and drug charges. So 37 years, Carla Crowder with Alabama Appleseed represented you and made an argument to a Jefferson County judge that your sentence was unconstitutional. The judge granted it, and we got to come pick you up in the middle of December. Can you even describe what the last couple of months have been like after that much time in and for so long? When I met you in 2014, really until last year, you had no idea if you were ever going to get out.
No, I thought I was going to die in there. Me and a number of my friends under the same sentence, under the impression that we were going to probably die in there. Whatever hope that we might gain of getting some kind of relief in our case would soon get smutted out by some politician in Montgomery. But these last few, well, I've been out about a little over 3 months now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been incredible. The first few days was like, I was in a wonderland. I was in another world. Everything was new to me. Everything seemed brighter. I was paying attention to even leaves, the squirrels. It's like, hey, I was just happy to see a squirrel. Because in prison, you don't see them things. You're lucky if you still fly with some wild one that probably got through the cracks. But it's been wonderful. The support I've had. I think I would have struggled a lot if I didn't have the support I had behind me. If I didn't have really people from OAA, particularly Dena, Deborah, it's like they'll become like my family, like real family. And it's as if they can look at me and tell when I'm going through something, or tell when it's just something bothering me. It's like it's a connection because they know what I'm going through. They've been through it. And when I'm going through something, I just need to talk to them. And they have been like, they have helped me in ways that I couldn't have imagined getting out of prison. I didn't think that I would have that kind of support, those type of people to talk to. And as far as my lawyers, they become more like family too, not just my lawyers. And right now, I've been able to accomplish so many things that I wouldn't have been able to accomplish if it weren't for these people, particularly Dena and Deborah. And it's like they're there for me. And as for Alabama Appleseed, Carla Crowder, I've often told her that she came into prison, eased the noose up off my neck and walked me out of there. But that's exactly what she did. I didn't even believe when I was told that I might be getting out. I still doubted that. Yeah. Because it's been embedded in me so deep that I doubted it. But right now, I have so many options. The sky's the limit. And it can get kind of overwhelming at times, because at times it's the sense of freedom that hit me, because I think I done got through the newness, but sometimes it just hit me out of nowhere, and I have to like, just know that I'm living a beautiful life now. And if it weren't for you, Beth, Dena, Deborah, Carla, I wouldn't be happy right now. And I can actually tell you that I am so happy.
And we are so happy for you and with you. Dena, of course, the work that you do supporting folks coming out of the system like Ron is really incredible. And we should mention to everyone, unpaid. Dena has a full-time job that she's working, and this is like a second job that she's doing. But you are using, Dena, your own experience that you had during your incarceration that I think is a uniquely devastating phenomenon of our country incarcerating young mothers and taking them away from their children. Can you talk a little bit about that part of your journey and how that impacted your reentry and the challenges that you faced and coming off a long incarceration separated from your son?
Wow. I had become someone new. The only thing that I held on to, even though I didn't have the without on my sentence, it still felt like I would never get out of this place. I couldn't imagine 114 years forward. I had a 6-year-old son at home, and it was very difficult, but I think that was my strength in becoming something different. I had believed all of everything that I had heard about me. I had become everything that people mentally and emotionally, I think that people had said, the stigma that comes with the choices that I've made. But it was through a series of classes and therapy and a lot of in-depth self-rehabilitation, if you will, that I realized that a lot of my decisions were based on some experiences that I had in my own childhood with trauma. And so my response to that trauma had carried on into my teen years, of course, labeling me as a child in need of supervision, a CHIN, which led me to the Juvenile Delinquent Center. I was taken from my mother's home, and my aunt, which is my grandmother's sister, ended up raising me. And so when I left my son at 6, I felt like I had abandoned him because I had already had abandonment issues on my own. And so coming home 10 years later to a 16-year-old, the only thing I wanted to do was get there and catch him, I said to friends, before he gets grown. Because I had learned so much and had grew so much, and I had so much to give him. And when I got there, unfortunately, he never returned home to me. I was living in a halfway house. So us rebuilding a relationship, he wasn't a 6-year-old boy anymore. I can remember him coming to spend a couple of weeks with me. And it was because of other friends and people that I had heard what their challenges were that I knew it was going to be difficult, but I was willing to embark upon that journey. And I can remember him coming to spend a couple of weeks with me when I first came home. And my nephew was 3 years old at the time. And so I tried to take them to the movies, and I was going to take him to get some ice cream. And we were there, and they said the movie was going to start about 30 minutes. So I drove off the lot, and I heard him mumble in the back seat that I was treating him like a kid. And he mumbled he didn't want to go to no movies and eat ice cream. And that crushed my soul, because the only thing I knew was my 6-year-old baby.
Yeah.
Unbeknown to me, that's the only way that I could deal with him. I didn't know how to deal with a teenage son. I wasn't a mother of a teenager when I left. And so now at 26 years old with a grandson, 2, actually, we're growing to be closer, but I depend on many of my own peers' experiences as they've navigated through those difficult spaces in being a parent and being a parent of older children. So I've had to learn to reparent. I mean, I had to really pick up some serious parenting skills. So that's one of my biggest challenge, I believe, as it relates to my reentry outside of all the other collateral consequences that comes with the conviction itself. So
thank you, Dena.
Mhm.
Ron, you also started having brushes with the criminal justice system really young. I think you shared with me that you went to what was then known as the Boys Industrial School several times, and you got your first conviction that was used against you under the habitual offender law when you were 18. And I think you ended up getting sent to prison with your life sentence at 21 or 22. So you went through a whole evolution in prison, despite the circumstances. The circumstances and the environment doesn't really support rehabilitation. It doesn't support personal development, but you were able to overcome your environment, develop your artistic talents, really grow and change. Can you talk about some of the programs that made a difference and why it's so important to have those kinds of programs in prison? I think one time you told me you felt like those programs kept you alive. They were literally like a survival line for you.
Well, those programs kept challenging me. Now, Lawson State, they've been teaching GED, and they also, Lawson State and Gaston State College also had a course in there years back, academic courses. But I didn't really start getting serious in my classes till I returned back to Donaldson in 2004, when I started getting involved with the UAB lecture series, the UAB literature series, and also Kai Stevens' Alabama Prison Project. And those classes, the instructors, they would come in and, I don't know, it's just the way they would challenge you as if you were a college student. And they made me realize that I could keep up with the pace. And each class that I took, it kind of strengthened me more. The more I learned about myself, the more confident I became, because once, like when I got into my art and just really got into it, I was using that art for meditation. It was like the ability to be able to create something that people would love, and that I did that. That was inspiring. But the classes, yeah, they kept me alive. They gave me purpose. They gave me something to do, and I just loved having assignments. It's like, just please give me an assignment. Give me something to do. Tell me something that, direct me in a direction where I can create something. And most of the things, if you've seen me write, most of my art it's come from assignment, particularly the things I've written. And they've challenged me in ways that I couldn't help but grow or just die. And I felt that if I wasn't being productive, if I wasn't growing in there, if I wasn't learning something new, I was going to end up like so many of those sad, miserable guys that I saw every day, all day. Sometimes they just speaking right behind me, in front of me, and you hear the negativity, you hear the lack of hope. And I just needed somewhere to go to get away. And that classroom was my sanctuary.
And that's why people like me and ACLU of Alabama, Alabamians for Fair Justice, that oppose Governor Ivey's prison construction plan, we feel like investing in programs, education, vocational training, even volunteer programs in prison would be a more effective use of dollars than just building some new buildings, because we know that they're barely scratching the surface with offering educational and rehabilitative programs in prison. Dena, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about some of the folks that are joining us are interested in hearing about the stigma in coming out of prison, and specifically what you faced, and then how you got connected with OAA coming out of prison. How did that happen?
Oh, the stigma coming out of prison. It's hard to release some of the things that persons have told you prior to you coming out, and then walking into those experiences on your own really makes it true. And so I was working at a warehouse in Bessemer, making $7.25 an hour. And I can remember I had been working there for a number of years, and me transitioning from prison to freedom with the same job, my supervisor was still treating me and reminding me that, remember, you got this job because of where you were. And so in essence, I was still being treated like an inmate. And it was real stressful the first 8 months. I was fearful and seeking other employment because I was only allowed to leave the job to report once a month to my probation officer. So I was putting clothes in the car on the days that I would report, and there was a job fair. I would have clothes to go to a job fair because that was the only time I could be off. And I can utilize that. Well, they didn't get to me in time, because I have to report. And I would try to find jobs that way. And nothing gave. And I can remember going to a self-help group and one of the guys there say, hey, I think this job is available. And that's actually how I walked into the firehouse shelter. The job was available. I was taking a class, a Microsoft Word class through the Aletheia's house, and a job readiness course. And so I built a resume and got this job. So yeah, though that's just one of the things. And so I haven't had the difficulty as most because it sort of kind of was there. But my challenge was how could I transition who I had become into this world instead of this world transitioning to me, if you will. And I didn't want to get caught up in all of the other things that was going on. So anything else, Beth? Did that answer your question?
That was great. Yes. I always learn things from you, Dena. And I might come back to you and ask you to tell the story about going to your first meal at a restaurant. But I want to ask Ron real quick. We've got some questions about HB 107, which is the bill sponsored by Representative Chris England to overturn Alabama's habitual offender law. So for those of you that don't know, our habitual offender law or 3 strikes law is the main reason Alabama's prisons are overcrowded, because we put inflated, enhanced sentences on people and put them in prison for 50 years to life in prison, sometimes for crimes under our current sentencing guidelines would get 12 years and under. And so a lot of those folks went to prison in the 80s and 90s, although the habitual offender law is still on the books and is still used when prosecutors want to use it. So Ron, you were one of many people. I think I identified over 500 people, men and women, who were serving life without parole under the habitual offender. And I know that you knew many of the men that got these terminal sentences. And they also went into prison very young, like you did. What could you share with folks about the people that you served time with and why second chances like the one you got are so important, especially for folks that have served 20, 30, 40 years in prison? Well,
as you said, I'm just one of many. And be honest, we had us like a little group. All right, because it seemed when you go around talking to different people, you kind of learn what they're in there for and the type of crime. And a number of us was like, I haven't even killed anybody, I haven't even hurt anybody, because you got a lot of people around you that have, committed murder cases and have some real horrible cases. You begin to ask yourself, why am I in here? Why have I done 30, 40 years or whatever? But it's some sad guys in there. And I've seen guys that was in my situation that would turn to drugs just to try to get away from this hopelessness of just gonna die now. I've seen guys do some crazy things because they just tired of living. It's this term that guys will use when they say get into it with officers, I'm gonna make you kill me. You hear that often, I'm gonna make you kill me. Because the reality, I think these guys be saying, and what I feel from years of seeing is that I want to kill myself. I'm tired of this. But instead, I'm just going to make you do it. So please, you do it because, knock me unconscious, put me in lockup, just put me away because I'm tired of just doing the same thing every day. And it can test you. And I'm not, you know, I'm nothing special about me. I wasn't nothing, some kind of special ingredients in me that made me be able to, like, you know, endure it. But it's a lot of guys. It's a lot of guys that are just like me that just need a second chance. And even with this bill, as you know, Beth, we've heard different bills supposed to be coming out of Montgomery that's supposed to help us. We've heard of so many over the years. I mean, I can go back 20 years ago. And even right now, you got guys that has hope. Even me, I hope that it passed. But I've got this doubt in me that somebody's going to come along and just try to block again and just let them die in there, because they don't really care about us. If they was just take different individuals and just talk to them and learn their story, learn their background, what they've been through, and learn what they've accomplished since they've been in there, I don't know, they might kind of change their mind. But I wish that this bill would pass, because I'm still talking to a number of guys in prison, and you will have some happy guys. I'm talking about tearful guys. I mean, will actually just cry.
And people that have really aged out of criminal behavior, that are, you know, just kind of being warehoused in prison at this point, right?
But Beth, you got people in wheelchairs. I mean, on walkers. That place is turned into a old folks home, and also a mental institution. Mm-hmm. It's crazy in there. You would think, you know, all these things you see on the TV, these movies about prison and all that. No, you just got a lot of guys sitting around getting old, getting bored, and just practically trying to kill each other because they just ain't got nothing else to do. But I'm 59. My next number will be 60. I never thought that I would live that long in prison, you know, because, you know, I see people die. I see a number of guys with these knife wounds around their neck that's done to what it's. I'm a barber. I used to color a lot of guys' hair. I used to see the wounds where they got hit upside the head with. You know, you've talked to just as many guys as me. You done heard the sad stories, and maybe that first average person wouldn't believe it. You'll think we're just making it up. But the way the media has a way of painting a picture that will fool you, it will really fool you. And there's a lot of sad and hurting guys in prison. I'm hoping that this bill passed, it will make a lot of them happy. Especially they need to pay attention to that Class D felony bill as well and make that retroactive.
Right. I know that 2 of your prior convictions, Ron, for people that don't know his story, had 4 convictions total. He mentioned the first-degree robbery was what got him the life without parole sentence. He had a 3rd-degree burglary, and then 2 credit card fraud cases, which are now considered Class D felonies that don't even send people to prison anymore. But when the legislature created that Class D felony, they didn't make it retroactive to help people like Ron that were serving inflated sentences. So that's a different bill, and I'm with you, Ron. I hope it passes. Maybe Jasmine can put in the chat ACLU of Alabama's link for people to monitor HB 107, because some folks have asked about it. So Dena, I'm going to ask you to quickly tell that story, because you've told it to me a couple times, and you told it to my students at UAB, and it really puts into perspective not just the physical violence that people encounter in incarceration. Ron mentioned the knife wounds, and people with slashed necks is like a regular thing, but also the psychological wounds that people suffer in such a dehumanizing and horrendous environment. So can you walk us through that day when you went to lunch with some friends right after you'd gotten out, and what happened? Oh, I think you're muted, Dena.
Sorry. A group of my friends had taken me out to a Mexican restaurant, and we were all just, you know, sitting around the table, maybe about 9 people, and laughing and everything, waiting on the waitress. And of course, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting, because when I left, I was used to salads and cheeseburgers from McDonald's. So this is going to be very interesting. And they were like, what do you want? And so I was like, I was telling one of my good friends who became my mentor, I was telling her, I said, well, I like chicken. Anything that's chicken, I like chicken. And so we were looking, so she said, oh, that's pollo. I'm like, okay. So we were talking, so she said, you like vegetables too. So we were looking, so I said, anything with vegetables and chicken. So we created, well, we didn't create, I said, well, she said, that's a fajita. You can do that because it has bell peppers, onions, and it's on this hot skillet though. And I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. And the waitress came and she was asking everybody what would they have and everything. She was going around the room and at the table and getting everybody's order. And when she got to me, she asked me, what would I have? And you, ma'am, and I pulled the menu up to my face and I just was stuck and I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't look at her. And inside I was saying, what in the world is happening? And I was shamed. I couldn't look at this free world lady because they had told us over the decade that I was there, whenever people would come in, we would have to get to the wall. Inmate, get to the wall, free world on the hall. And we would have to stop right where we were and turn to the wall and put our face to the wall and not look, not move until they tell us we were free to go. And years of that, unbeknown to me, I had become conditioned to it. And that's where we are socially incapable of dealing with persons outside of people that, you know, even the colors, because we were used to white all the time. And that's what made OAA so important. When my parole advocate told me that I had to go to a luncheon, and Deborah Daniels pitched the vision of where were the formerly incarcerated people and why weren't we reaching back to help others gain what we had, which was not only freedom and freedom successfully, but I think to navigate through the woes and challenges, whether they be psychological or whether they be the physical components, in which everyone knows we need fair housing. We need an opportunity to affordable living wages. We need medical attention. We need mental health treatment. I mean, knowing to me, I may have a diagnosis. I still haven't got diagnosed, but nevertheless, it was because of that luncheon that I was able to actually see exactly what was my purpose for my pain. And so going forward, OAA became something that I lived and I breathed in order to help other people gain what I had. And that was a way to navigate through those challenges. But there's a psychological effect that I think the institution is designed to do, from stripping you when you get to the back gate and you're in a room with 20 other women and they make you get butt naked and they spray you down and they delice you, is what they call it. And you got this gook on you and you're standing here and you cannot move because they told you not to. And right then they strip you of everything that's dear to you, that's private, right then. And I think that's their way to let you know, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And so you have that mentality going forward. And we're not going to talk about the screams in the middle of the night, but that was enough to let you know that whatever's going on from this point on, you no longer have the say in your life. So
we are almost out of time, but I want to give Dena and Ron just like 1 or 2 minutes each to kind of wrap it up. And if there's anything else that you want to share with folks that are joining us about your experience in prison, the things that need to change, why it's important for people to pay attention to these issues, what y'all would say to lawmakers, if you could. And I know you do. I know both of y'all, have made your voices heard. But Dena, do you want to start?
Okay. Well, what I would say is seek the truth. You have to come away from your own ideas and things that you don't have the experience in because of fear and what you ideally think about the horrendous thoughts that you may have when it comes to prison, or the reason people go to prison. Automatically, when a person says prison, you go to the left with your mind. You think the worst of worst. And you really don't know. It's just as when we saying we need to build these $1 billion prisons when I first heard it. And then next thing you know, it's $3 billion. And everyone is thinking, well, yes, if I'm going to invest money Yes, but if we want safer communities, then we need to invest in people. I had a nonviolent charge. Even if it had taken the 30 years of me getting out, I was still denied rehabilitation as it relates to getting a GED. I served 10 years in prison and was denied the right to get a GED because I was going to be a part of the furniture. In Dickerson, you have enough time later on, but not right now. And then
But they wouldn't let you into the GED program
no,
because
because of my sentence. You know,
That's
I wasn't a short timer. It
Yeah,
didn't look like I was coming home no time soon. And so, no, you can't get in there. So I got my GED from Lawson once I got home, but I had did 10 years, enough time to probably get me 2 bachelors or something, right? And so we're saying that we want better, safer communities as it relates to persons that are getting out, but we're not preparing people to get out. We prepare them to stay in prison.
Yeah.
We condition them for prison. So what I would say to someone listening is that if we will invest in people and not buildings, then just maybe we can change and shift the trajectories. It's very important to look at these laws. It's very important to look at the ugly history of how they came about so that we'll know persons that feel we have a different mindset and heart, what we as a new America can do about all of these things that are still plaguing our communities nevertheless. And they're doing it in a way that's real sneaky and underhanded to a point that we're yaying and we're rallying for our persons that we've placed in offices and in the legislature and everything, and we have no earthly idea what's really going on because we're not challenging anything because it's not affecting me directly. And as Ron has spoken, prisons have become places for persons that suffer with substance use disorders as well as mental health challenges.
Yeah. Ron, what's the final thing that you'd like to share with folks? We've got maybe about 2 or 3 minutes left, but
Simply, one thing I would like to share is that forgiveness. We can't forget that we must forgive. People make mistakes. And if you don't have forgiveness in your heart, then you're going to hurt a lot of people. And so just understand that, yeah, everyone in prison has made some sort of mistake, but you got to forgive them and you got to figure out how they've grown since they've been there. And pay attention to the guys that got out and what they're doing. It's so many of us that gotten out that had life without they had other sinners that have living wonderful lives, giving back to society in ways that you wanted us to. And many of us coming out. These prisons are full, but many people are coming out. So you need to pay attention to what you're going to be doing when a while in there because they will be coming back to society. That's all I've got to say.
thank you, Ron, and thank you, Dena. I love you both so much, and I'm so glad to support both of you through OAA and just through friendship. And I just appreciate every time y'all share your experiences because I think it helps bridge that gap between people that don't have a personal connection. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth, so much.
Beth, thank you so much. Dena, Ron, Deborah. I cannot underscore how important this conversation is. We often talk about the work of the ACLU, but the truth of the matter is this work is not done but for the people that we impact, their stories, their experiences, informing us on the way in which we should go. So I thank you all for being so vulnerable, so open. I hope each of you that is joining us today, if you do not go away from this conversation unchanged, please leave this conversation informed. Thank you again. It is critically important for us to understand the stories of those who have been formerly incarcerated, who have not only these experiences, but really this perspective regarding redemption and accountability and transformative justice. And I believe that that is truly centered in the work of criminal legal reform. And I believe that Dena and Ron both elevated the importance of investing in people. And so when we talk about community safety and we talk about divesting from the carceral and punitive practices of this country, what we are saying is we need to reinvest in people. Because when you give people hope, they can do anything and they can achieve anything, but we must first ensure that we are doing our due diligence and investing in community and investing in people. So again, thank you all. I am Jatan Bosby, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Alabama. I don't believe that I introduced myself at the beginning. Again, we appreciate you all. We hope that you continue joining us for our Reading the Tea Leaves series to understand the issues that are affecting the state of Alabama as we continue working to protect our civil rights and civil liberties. Thank you all. Enjoy your afternoon.